I grew up right here in New York City, in Brooklyn, in case you couldn't tell by my accent. And we used to play punch ball and stickball right in the streets. Parked cars were our bases, and when we would run to tag a base or scoot over the hood of a car to try to catch a ball, our hands would come up covered, our shirts would come up covered with black grimy soot. When buses or trucks rolled by, those big clouds of particulate matter would interfere with our games. We would turn our heads away, cover our faces. Even then, I was probably 10 or 11 at the time, I knew that there had to be a better way and that this wasn't right in the city. Whether you're rich or poor, whether you live in city or suburb, you ought to be entitled to breathe clean air and drink clean water and have some green space to play. And that's part of the reason why I decided on a career as an environmental advocate. Today I'm here to talk a little about, this afternoon, New York City's water supply, which I submit is the city's most valuable capital asset. This system includes 19 collecting reservoirs that, when they're all filled to the brim, have a capacity of 580 billion gallons. That's theoretically enough to supply the city's drinking water needs for an entire year. The system includes 346 miles of aqueduct and tunnels. The Catskill Aqueduct is just one example. It's a 92-mile tunnel, the longest one in the world when it was built. It carries 40% of the city's water. It's plunging 1,100 feet under the Hudson River to bring water from as far away as 100 miles to New York City, almost entirely by gravity without using outside power. The system also has 5,800 miles of pipes and mains, and they provide 1.1 billion gallons of water to New York City residents every day. Half the state's population, because 85% of Westchester County also takes from the city supply, as do other communities up and down the watershed region. And you get this water, although water rates have been increasing, still for less than the cost of an average cable TV bill. So, while we all heard earlier presentations and we share the RPA, Ralph Perani's commitment to the transit system, we recognize its role in mobility and the economics of the city. It's hard to imagine how the city could function for even a single day without this amazing, priceless, and irreplaceable water supply. Most New Yorkers take this supply for granted, but New York City residents has had to face a wide variety of challenges to the quantity and quantity of our water during the 400-year period that our conference is covering. And during much of that period, there have been three themes that have made recurring appearances and help explain how city and state officials have dealt with their fundamental responsibility to provide clean drinking water for a thirsty city. First, politics, as much as science, law, economics, or any other factor, has been an ever-present driver in shaping water quality decisions. And especially at conferences like this, filled with distinguished academic experts, interested students, urban experts, it's important to pay our respects to those who really aren't here today, with one or two exceptions. Our elected officials and our political leaders who de facto hold the fate of this water supply and the future of this water supply in their hands. A second recurring theme relates to the crisis-oriented nature of decision-making on this water quality issue over the years and into the future. Many of the most important decisions that have been made with respect to our water supply have actually been made only years, if not decades, after experts first talked about them, after the concepts were first laid out in studies, and only after water-related crises of one sort or another jolted government into action. And the third theme and challenge that weaves itself through the environmental protection issues in general and New York City's water supply history in particular is the conflict between long-term and short-term. The threats are often long-term in nature, but our decision-making process, our political system, is responsive to issues that are short-term. In other words, the big challenge facing the water supply today and in the years to come is getting our decision-makers to take a long-term view. In my remarks this afternoon, I'm going to hit some of the highlights of this history of the water supply and provide some examples of how these three themes have played out over the years. And to paraphrase Howard Zinn, the author of The People's History of the United States, I'm going to cover 400 years in about 20 minutes. I figure I'll save you a little time. My PowerPoint is pretty bare bones too. I really enjoyed the last couple of PowerPoints, which were works of art. That's even more bare bones. This is it. This is a map of the New York City water supply, and I had a wonderful and quite funny, I believe, set of PowerPoint slides to put together, but for reasons that I won't get into now, we're not going to see them today. At least we'll save a little time. We'll get to this in a moment. It started off well enough, however, when both the population and demand for water here in the city were small. During the early colonial period, Dutch and English settlers at the southern tip of Manhattan drew water from clear ponds and streams and from freshwater wells. Clean water was also plentiful for those who were living in what became the city's other boroughs. In the 1700s and up to the mid-1800s, residents of Manhattan relied primarily on four sources for their water supply. One of the earliest sources was local wells. The first public well was sunk by the British in 1666 at Fort Amsterdam on the foot of Broadway. Reliance on these underground supplies increased throughout the 19th century, and residents drew on a large number of private wells, especially those who could afford it, although precise numbers are unavailable. As early as the mid-18th century, however, some wells were being contaminated by cesspool, seepage, street runoff, and brackishness from the surrounding waterways in the Hudson and the East River. Second early source of water was the collect. You've heard about that from some prior presenters today, and I'm glad you've seen a picture of it. Because you're not seeing anything else. The collect was a pond of 48 acres with wetlands lying to the south around what's now Foley Square. The pond was 70 feet deep. It had numerous underground springs that fed it, but by the 1780s, the quality of the collect was declining, as we heard, because of dumping of garbage, the siting of tanneries in the vicinity and other industries, and not surprisingly, its use as a water supply fell off, and the city actually began filling in the collect in 1803. Natural springs furnished the third source of water in colonial times to the mid-1800s. One popular source was the tea water pump. It was located a spring just east of the present Chinatown, and for decades this source was probably the single best, highest quality drinking water in New York City for those that